Hey now, it's Yvette from Florida Treats and Sweets. I'm here to show you how to make this super simple, super cute fondant bunny cake. And guess what? It's not just for Easter, it's for whenever you want to create. Please remember to subscribe, watch, like, and share. All right, now let's learn this together. Hi there. So I'm using my hands to knead the fondant. I'm also adding a little cornstarch to my work surface to keep my fondant from sticking. Of course, I use the fondant roller to roll out my fondant till about 1/4 inch thick. I found this really cute cutter that was supposed to be for an Easter egg, but it made the perfect cutter for the little bunny foot. You can also add a little Tylose or Gum Tex to your fondant to make it a little firmer um, if you'd like. If not, that's okay, no worries. I had to re-roll that one foot because it was a little bit thicker than the other one. Make sure you smooth out those edges. Next, I used a bowling tool that you can find on Amazon, or sometimes they'll have them in a craft store. But I used one end of the fondant baller to make the bottom portion of the little bunny feet foot pads. You can also add a little bit of cornstarch or powdered sugar if you find that your fondant is a little too sticky. So I just made 4 indentations in each little foot, and I'm going to add some pink fondant there in order to make his little feet pads. I actually made this pink fondant out of a darker pink and a little bit of white. I used a 1:4 ratio to get this color. I'm also using 2 small round cutters to make those pads. Now what you'll see is I'm going to actually roll those into little balls in order to go into the little indentations I made earlier. I am using my own glue, my ooey gooey etta gluey, in order to adhere these little pink pads to my bunny's feet. Make sure you roll them just right. Once I rolled my little balls, I added a little bit of my ooey gooey etta gluey. You can use any adhesive you like, water or some other glue is fine. And I used that stylus to remove a little piece of glitter that I had on that foot. I'm also again using a smaller cutter to make the balls for the top portion of my little bunny feet. I discovered that the little cutouts were too big. So I ended up cutting them in half so that they would be the perfect size to fit in those little top indentations that I made. Again, I used my index finger and the palm of my hand to roll my pink fondant into little bitty balls. Now, once you've gotten all of your little balls in place, make sure they're secure. I then used a tool to make little indentations in the bunny's feet to indicate his little toes. Just a little added something to give it a little bit of character. I'm going to apply a little bit of my Etta glue. I use that rolling pin to stabilize my cake. It's a cake dummy and it's lighter, so they tend to roll. So again, I will apply a little bit of my ooey gooey Etta gluey to the bottom of each foot so that they can stay securely on my cake. Now, if your cake is buttercream, you won't have to do this if it's still tacky. If it's not, you can apply just a little bit of wet buttercream to the feet and then adhere that to your cake, and that should work just fine. Now I'm going to go ahead and make his little nose. And what I did was I took some fondant, I rolled it into a ball, and then I shaped that ball into a little egg. And I'm going to use that same tool I used on his little feet to make the indentation for his nose. Take your time. You don't have to add this detail if you don't want to, but the more detail you can make it, the cuter it'll be. Make sure you have the appropriate size for whatever cake you're making. I'm going to apply a little glue to the back of his nose and pop it right on the front of my cake. Make sure it's secure though. I'm now going to take a piece of that leftover paint that we had, and I'm going to make his little nose. It's almost like an upside down triangle. I think when I originally made it, it was a little bit too much fondant, and I needed to make an indentation where I wanted his nose to be. I was trying to figure out, do I want to use that tool or if I wanted to use another one, and I settled in on that one. So I'm making just a little indentation at the top of his nose for his little pink part of his nose to fit. I did take away some of the fondant because I felt like the pink part of his nose is just a little bit too big. And as you can see, I use my thumb and index fingers to make his little nose. And it's like I said, almost like an upside down triangle. Take your time. You got this. Now before you adhere it, make sure it's the size and shape that you want. Okay, now I'm just using one of my tools to make his little nostrils. Just making an indentation inside of each one to make his little nose as realistic as possible. And those tools I'm using can be found on my website, shopfleurdetreats.com, if you're interested. If not, you can use whatever you have. I'm also going to use a little bit of black fondant here in order to make his little lashes and his whiskers. I used a straight edge in order to cut my whiskers, but you feel free to use whatever you have. As you can see, I rolled a piece of fondant into a little snake, a rope, or whatever you'd like to call it. Used my straight edge to cut it, and then just roll out however much you need. And then prior to putting it on my cake, I made sure I had enough to make the design that I wanted. Once you're satisfied with your lashes, make sure they're just the way you want them. Make sure they're even, the same size. Once you've done that, you can apply whatever adhesive you're using to the back of your lashes. Be careful because you are applying black fondant to a white cake. If you apply too much of a liquid, it'll stain. So take your time, be creative, have fun. Here I'm taking the rest of that black fondant that we used for the lashes, and I'm going to use that to make the whiskers. Again, I used a little bit of cornstarch and my fondant roller to roll out a super thin piece of fondant. And I used my straight edge cutter, my straight edge blade in order to cut little bitty strips. The smaller the better. So I cut little bitty strips as even as I possibly could using my straight edge. You can purchase that in most hobby stores in the clay section where you would find tools for clay. Then I took those and I cut them in half. And again, I used some of my ooey gooey etta gluey to adhere the little whiskers to the cake. I changed brushes. I started using a smaller brush because I didn't want to put too much glue and have that black run all over the white portion of my cake. this is just an added little touch. I did use some petal dust to apply just to his little cheeks, right above his little whiskers. You don't have to if you don't want to. It just added a little bit of color. And that was some petal dust that you can also find at any craft store in the cake section. And I just use a little fuzzy brush to do that. He's looking cute. Using some white fondant, and I have Tylose powder on my work surface. Tylose will help to strengthen the fondant because we're going to be making his little ears, and we want those to be able to stand up and not fall down. So all I'm doing is just picking up some of that Tylose powder that I put down so that I can add that to my fondant. Go ahead and make sure you knead that really, really well. I rolled it into like a big fat sausage type thing. I just rolled it on my work surface back and forth using the palm of my hands. And then once I was satisfied with the length, I cut it in two because I had a little piece of something. I had glitter all over my workstation. So I cut that in two and I kind of flattened it out with my hand and used my fondant roller to make a little, I guess you could say, like a dugout. And then I used my hands to make his little ear pointy and to make that little dugout, that little indentation, go all the way to the top of his little ear. Take your time. And if you mess up, you can always roll it, knead it back up and start again. And again, I'm just going to repeat that same thing for the other ear as well. Okay, make sure you have a really good flat surface on those ears so that they stand up really good on your cake. I'm also going to take some of that same leftover pink fondant to make the inside of his little ears. I'm going to roll that out. You may need to add a little cornstarch or powdered sugar on your workstation if your fondant starts sticking like mine was doing. I rolled that out pretty thin because it's going to go just inside his ear. And now what I did was I just freehand cut this. I didn't actually have a mold or anything. I just used a fondant cutter. Some people call them a pizza cutter. And I just kind of freehand cut the inside of the ear. It doesn't have to be perfect. If you can get one of them, like as perfect as you want to get it, then you can use that one as a template for the next one, and that's what you're going to see me do here. Take your time, you can do it. As you can see, I used the first one as a template for the second one. and it made it a whole lot easier to make them match. And once you got them all sorted out, you can go ahead and add a little whatever adhesive you're using, whether it be water or some other glue or my ooey gooey at a gluey that's available on my site. Just make sure you don't put a lot. Position those inside of the cavity that we made earlier. And this one ear I did like a little fold, I fold it down. But make sure if when you fold yours down that you add a little adhesive to the immediate corners, because mine started to come loose a little bit. So I had to add a little bit of glue. And I always double check before I actually put my pieces together, just to make sure they're going to go together the way I want them to. Go ahead and cut off any excess that you may have at the bottom. Take your time, you can do it. I just wanted that one to be a little bit more pointy. And at the bottom, I'm going to go ahead and pinch those and just add a little bit of my adhesive to hold them together at the bottom. Now, I didn't show it here, but I did insert two tiny skewers into both of them. You'll see them on the next frame because I was afraid that they weren't going to stand up, and I wanted them to be able to stand up without kind of falling down. Oh, I did use the skewers. Whoops. Make sure if you use skewers that you add some type of adhesive to the top of the skewers so that once your piece dries, it won't slip through the skewer. So that's what I was doing. I was applying just a little bit of my glue onto the stick so that when I insert them into my ears, they don't slide down, that they actually are glued into the little ears. Voila! Now let's clean up so we can make the bow. Here, I'm adding some little teeth. You definitely don't have to do this if you don't want to. It's just two square pieces of leftover fondant that I glued right underneath his little nose. And I made another snake or sausage or rope type of piece of fondant. And I made them skinnier on the ends. And I'm just going to go ahead and glue that right into place. You can see it's almost like a little half moon shape thing. And I just simply rolled that out like I did with his eyelashes, or her eyelashes rather. And make sure you put a little adhesive there, and then you can glue that right into place if you decide to add those two details to your bunny. I'm a little OCD. I wanted it to be a little bit longer. There you go, bunny girl. Or bunny boy, whichever one you're making. Yay! Okay, so next we're going to actually make the bow that's going to go on top. I'm adding a little cornstarch. I'm going to use my fondant roller to roll out my fondant. That's some lavender fondant I made using dark purple and white. Again, I did that 4 parts of white to 1 part of purple to get that lavender. I like to mix my fondants. Now this is rolled about 1/4 of an inch thick, and I use this specialty roller that I have. It makes almost a fabric type pattern on fondant. I love it when I'm making bows. It makes them look so realistic. Now I did purchase that off Amazon, but it was a couple of years ago, so I'm not certain if that's still available. I'm going to use a ruler to make my bow, and that ruler is about 2 inches wide. Yes, it's 2 inches wide, and it was about, I would say it was about 5 to 6 inches long before I cut off the tails. And all you're going to do is flip it over on the right side down, fold it in half, and make a little indentation so that you'll know where the middle is. I apply a very small amount to the center of the little indentation that I made. I fold that in half, and then I put some additional glue on the outside of the bow, and I fold those in half again. Make sure you pinch it well. And we're going to do the very same thing to the edges of the bow. Just a little adhesive in the middle, pinch that together, then put a little bit more adhesive on the outside, fold that over, pinch that together, and repeat on the other side. Remember, a little bit of glue in the middle, pinch, then put a very little bit of glue on the inside, pinch that. Make sure you pinch it really good. Then I take my pinky finger and I press down in the middle to kind of make it flat, because we don't want our bow to sit up high in the middle. I double check to make sure it's gonna meet the way I want it to. Add a very little bit of glue. Bring your 2 edges together, flip it over, because this is your front, that other side was the back. Press down in the middle with your finger, and make sure you puff those loops up, because we want a fluffy bow. Once you're satisfied with that, we're going to use that leftover purple to make the middle of the bow, so you can sit that aside. Again, add cornstarch or powdered sugar, roll out a piece of fondant, and again it was about 1/4 inch thick. Anything thinner may not stand up, may not hold the shape. Again, I'm going to use that specialty roller to make that fabric pattern in my fondant. If you don't have that, that's okay. I'm going to do a video later on how to make bows and go a little bit more into how you can use things around your house to make a bow. Now, I didn't use anything in particular to make the size, because as you're going to see, flip it over to the wrong side. We're going to add a little bit of glue, adhesive water, to the very edge of the longest portion of the bow, of the middle knot. And just curl that over, because it just gives it a more finished look. And you see how tiny that is. And repeat on the other side. I just cut it even because it was a little uneven. Just the smallest amount of adhesive. Again, you're going to roll it over like we did on the other side. It makes it look really finished. And once we've done that, we're going to turn it over to the right side up. And we're going to do that same pinching that we did with the bow. Now, as you can see, I didn't immediately add any glue, because my fondant was really pretty pretty pliable because my hands were warm from working with it. But I did add some just then. Now I found that it was a little long, so I did cut off some of it. Reapplied some of the adhesive, tested to see if it was like I wanted it to be. And then you're going to turn it on the wrong side. Apply your adhesive. I'm using my Ooey Gooey Etta Gluey. Then lift up and tuck the middle portion of your bow. Make sure you fluff it because we don't want a bow that's flat. We want the bow to be fluffy. And go ahead and make any adjustments you need to make. Fluff, fluff, fluff. Save those remnants. Waste out, want not. There's our little guy. Such a cutie patootie. Okay. So here are our ears. Now I did put those in my dehydrator because I was filming and I needed them to harden very quickly. I have a dehydrator that I use. And I pre-poked the holes in the top of the cake. And there she is, depending on if you're going to put the bow or not. Such a cutie patootie. And there's our bow. Now, I would allow that bow to harden a little bit longer. You can also add Tylose to the bow. And the Tylose will help to harden it. And once you've got it all together, wow.
I hope you enjoyed this video.
Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you enjoyed it. Please remember to subscribe, watch, like, and share. Thank you.